Raoul, it's great to have you on the podcast today. How you doing?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, John. I'm very excited for this interview.
Yeah, because I've been following you on Twitter for a couple of months now. Funny thing is, I kind of just jammed you randomly, but you were talking much about LV and Solidity. So I was like, oh, nice. Let me. And I mean, the tweets have been very resonating. Also helped me level up as a developer. I got to know Symbolic from your tweets and the rest of that. So I think the best way to probably start is to for those who don't know, could you kind of introduce yourself or tell us about who Raoul is?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think you cut off in the last part, but I think you asked me to introduce myself. So yeah, I'm Raoul. I'm a formal verification engineer at Runtime Verification, and we are building security tools, mostly free to use, most of them also open source. Yeah, so there's the professional and digital me, and I think we are going to talk more about this part of me in the main part of this interview. But there's also the analog and the unprofessional me. So if I'm
You love that
if I'm
side.
not if I'm not working, then I really like to um, well, I like to get to leave the city, to take my van, and just to go to the mountains, do some hiking, uh,
That's so fun.
pack up my tent, sleep in the woods. And yeah, I really love being on my feet. So started all with hiking, but last year I started to get into running, and I immediately made it my new identity. So uh, I really love being on my feet. I really love running, hiking, trail running. I think that's the unprofessional part of me.
Yeah, and one thing I discovered, as much as everybody's professional, like you have something serious you're doing, I think the unprofessional part kind of keeps us going. For example, I like playing keyboard, doing musical stuff, playing guitar and all those stuff. And I think in some ways, I mean, these kind of unprofessional things make us even kind of more becoming a kind of high performance professional, and it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important that you kind of find a balance between your work life
Yeah.
and your free time, your spare time. Yeah, I think that's something that actually um, I don't want to get too serious in this introductory part, but I think there's a problem in our space, and there's a lot of people that don't take their spare time and their mental health seriously, especially
Seriously.
among security researchers. There's a very high rate of burned out developers and researchers. And yeah, I think it's important for everyone to find a balance. Don't try auditing 12 hours a day, six
Too
days a week.
much.
That's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah. And do you think kind of what sponsors some of this hyper focus on work and neglecting other thing is probably the also culture around. I mean, I interact a bit with the security side of Twitter, and I noticed there is this kind of heavy also culture, hyper also culture thing there. Do you think that's probably one of the reasons behind people not getting into other aspects of life and just enjoying the all things around?
Yeah, I think the main part is really there's this grind mindset, right? So
Yeah,
that's telling people, hey, just do a
put in the
Solidity
work.
course and then grind security contest every day, single day, show up every day. Don't worry if you can't make it in the first 2 months. Just keep grinding, keep on doing. And that's kind of giving everybody the promise that they can make big money in security. Well, people kind of fall into this trap and they think, well, if I didn't make it, it's probably because I didn't try hard enough. So yeah, it's this promise of everybody can make it if they just keep grinding harder. But I think the opposite is the case. If you want to make it, you have to find a sustainable way um, in Web3, balance your life. Uh, you will be more productive. Actually, like most of the bugs that I find in code bases, they come as a shower thought, like when I'm not sitting at my desk or when I'm
Wow, when
taking
you're
a
not even
walk
reading the
outside.
code.
Yeah, I
Interesting.
mean, yeah, of course, I'm reading the code, but then after 2 hours, my concentration is just gone. So I need to go out for a walk and then shut down. And that's when I get the thought, oh, well, that's how I can exploit this. So yeah, it's a miracle what short breaks can do to your brain.
Yeah, I listen to Overman sometimes, and it kind of says some of these things, like when your physical aspects is intact, there is a way it helps you get more results or your brain to function more efficiently. But I think we are kind of going ahead of ourselves. Let's come back a
Yeah.
little. And I mean, one of the things I always try to do on this podcast, is a new podcast anyway, is that all of us building in Web3, or even those securing Web3 are also building Web3 too, we are humans at some level. So, and it's always very good to connect with the human side of everyone. So we can see that, okay, even though this guy is a security researcher, is more than a security researcher. So like the point of saying that is, could you please tell us about how you began?
Okay, so how far do you want to go back in time? I think, well, so we didn't have a family computer when we grew up, or we had one, but I was not allowed to use it very often. And then in 9th grade, like in school, we had the choice to pick a computer science course. And my mom told me, hey, that's something that you should do. And they promised me that we were building robots. So that sounded very interesting to the 15-year-old me, like building robots. That sounded cool. So I picked this course and I was immediately hooked up. So we started programming websites and I thought, wow, that's something that I'm really good at. And that's something that I enjoy. So I was locked in. And then after school, straight to university, studied computer science. I wanted to be like, I was then, I think, 19 years old. So I wanted to become a game programmer. And I actually took an internship for game programming. And then I decided, no, that's definitely not something that I want to do. Didn't catch my interest anymore. So yeah, that's when I started going deeper into programming languages and into security. So in my master degree, in my master's, I was really free to choose all the courses that I liked. There were no mandatory courses. I could
So it felt like a free will.
Yeah. So, and I took all the security courses on formal verification and programming languages that I could. And then did my master thesis in formal verification. And I think that's the first time when I started feeling a little bit anxious about my choices because, well, this formal verification is very niche. And like most of the jobs in formal verification, they are in academia. But I know I wasn't smart enough to do a PhD. And honestly, writing papers is not like my bread and butter. So I started getting anxious, but well, I had no choice. I completed my master thesis, and then my friend told me that they are looking for formal verification engineers in blockchain. I was like, hey, that sounds really cool.
Like, I've been doing this for a long.
Yeah, and then I was and then by lucky coincidence, I came across runtime verification, and this seemed to be the perfect job for me. So they are very deep into programming languages stuff. They are very deep into formal verification. So I just gave it a shot, and well, it worked out for me. But that was skipping over some details. So in the meantime, I was working for more than 8 years while I was studying in Web2. So I already collected a bunch of experience there before. And Web2 was very fun at first, but it started to become repetitive after 8 years.
Right.
So I was really looking for a change. I was really looking to do something else. And this blockchain, I mean, it was still, so this was 2021 when I joined runtime verification. So blockchain has been around for a while, but for me, it was still pretty new and everything is exciting. And I still think it is a very exciting space where innovation happens at a almost weekly basis. So yeah, I think that's one of the parts that I enjoy the most about being in blockchain is just the pace at which this space is evolving.
Yeah, and I mean, there was something I took from what you said now, and I'll probably, before we move on to formal verification and other technical things, you had prior interest in gaming, and but at the point you were like, okay, let me niche it down to SV and just focus on this. Now, for other engineers out there who probably are having choices of, okay, should I go with this niche of engineering or this one? What do you think helps you pick a better choice of choosing FV than that you think it will help a junior engineer now?
So, well, I am not very good. Maybe you should not take advice from me because, well, for me it worked out pretty well, and I was lucky in my choices. But what I did is I just like doing my studies and in all my jobs, I always just followed my heart. I just followed what I liked doing. So, and then only secondary was to me like, hey, how can I make money in this profession? But yeah, probably, well, I don't want to give advice to people. I also know that I was I had a lot of good starting conditions. So maybe, if you're starting from a different life, that may be not a good advice to follow.
But overall, you kind of encourage people to follow their hearts when they are making choices in engineering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of, I think especially for computer science or software engineers, this space is so huge. Like there's so many things that you can do. You can't just do what you love. Like if you want to become a game programmer, then just do game programming, develop games. There's no doubt that you will find a job in this space. If you want to become a blockchain engineer, then, well, go for it. And if you want to become an AI engineer, also go for it. There's so much demand for software engineers in literally every single domain. Yeah. So yeah, don't just try to follow the money, but really go for what you love.
Okay. I think that's really cool. That's really good. Then coming back to you comparing Web 2 and Web 3 and saying that a lot of things were becoming boring. I think I saw something close to that recently to when somebody saying, Solidity development is becoming boring, or maybe that's even later. Or they'll say, my point is, do you think a point will come when Web3 engineering or Web3 security will become as boring as it was in Web 2?
Well, I don't know. Well, I've been doing web development for 8 years, and I'm now in Web 3 for 4 years. And so far, I find it more interesting every day. So there's so much to learn. There's so much new innovation happening that I don't think it will bore me out soon. But well, then it's also hard to predict the future. So I don't know. So at least from a technical side, I believe that the blockchain space is just in its infancy, and it's there's cool stuff going to be surfacing over the next, 20 or 30 years. But yeah, really hard to predict the future.
Actually, I agree. Okay. I wanted to actually talk more about formal verification. For example, when I started writing smart contracts, I didn't know about formal verification. All I knew was write contracts, write tests. When we used to use ADATS then, write tests in ADATS to confirm it and all that. So could you please tell us more about formal verification and why it's important for Solidity developers?
Yeah. So, well, obviously we are in a space where there's a lot of smart contract risk. Like there's smart contracts that are handling millions, dozens of millions, and sometimes even billions in assets. And if one of these smart contracts gets hacked, then, well, many people will lose their investments. Some people will lose their life savings. And secondary, every smart contract hack leaves a permanent mark on the entire blockchain ecosystem in general. And we've seen a lot of these hacks, multi-million-dollar hacks. Like we see them like on a weekly basis, and this we cannot just accept the fact, right? This is not a good state to be in. So we must do everything that we can to make the blockchain ecosystem in general safer for everyone. Like if you are investing, even if you're just investing a tiny amount of money, then you shouldn't be afraid that somebody will hack the contract and your money will be gone. So, and we have, like, there's so many security techniques, and I think we must apply all of them to be as safe as we possibly can, especially for contracts that handle assets. I don't know, if you're just here for the fun, if you're just here to, I don't know, to share art with somebody, then maybe a smart contract hack is not that tremendous for you. But for DeFi specifically, I think it's very important that smart contracts and protocols take security very seriously. And so we have these techniques, we have manual audits, we have testing, we have formal verification, we have static analysis, and all these techniques actually improved a lot. And the smart contract risk seems to be the smart contract risk seems to get lower because we are applying all these techniques. So yeah, I know most of people have heard of auditing, most people have heard of testing, but if you ask them about formal verification, then that's usually new to them. And I think part of the reason is that there's a lot of prejudice about formal verification coming from other software industries. So formal verification is not new to software development. It's been around since computer science inception. Like we are using formal methods really since the 1920s. But formal verification in other domains is often very, very difficult to apply. That is for a lot of technical reasons. For example, in traditional finance, like banking systems, usually they are very dynamic. They have to talk to a database backend. They have to fetch data from different web services, and this makes it very hard to formally verify them. In the smart contract world, however, things are a little bit different. All our systems are also highly dynamic, but they are the environment in which they execute is way more limited and way more controlled. So, for example, a smart contract cannot just go and talk to a database. A smart contract cannot read from a file system, and it cannot execute a binary on your system. So that makes it very approachable to formal verification, because all these technical difficulties, or not all of them, but many of these technical difficulties that are challenging for formal verification don't apply in the blockchain sector. And also our smart contracts are usually very, very self-contained, very small. They are not like even the most complex systems. They maybe have 10,000 of lines of code, but they are not million lines of code like an operating system. So that makes it also more approachable to formal verification. And I think we have seen great success stories of formal verification in this space. So maybe we can talk about this a little bit later. But for example, runtime verification formally verified the deposit contract of the when Ethereum did the change from proof of work to proof of stake. So imagine the deposit contract getting hacked. What would be the consequences? It would be a huge black swan event. And fortunately, that didn't happen. And I think part of the reason is because the Ethereum Foundation is very concerned about security, and they use formal verification and all the other techniques also, like audits and testing, to make this contract as secure as possible. John asked me to tell you more about how I moved from an engineer to a dev role. Well, I think, well, now that you say it, I think I'm kind of doing what a dev role does. So that makes me, by definition, maybe a dev role.
Yeah.
But I think this is just really, it's just part of my engineering job. So we are building developer tools at runtime verification, formal verification tools and debuggers. And well, the users of our tools are developers. So it's just part of my job to talk to these developers and figure out what are their pain points. It's also my job just to hop on podcasts and tell people about what we are doing. It's my job to educate people about the tools that we are building, to write documentation, to develop workshops so that people can actually get the most out of our tools. And I think, well, I'm a big fan of the tools that we develop, obviously. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think they are great security tools and everybody can benefit from them. So I just feel I can have a bigger impact on security in general if I go out and talk to devs and show them what we have and ask them, hey, how can we make your life easier? Then I could have, if I was just building these tools in silence and then nobody would ever see them. And also I take some pride in the tools that we develop, and showing them to people is actually, for me, that's the best part of the job, is like people like see people using your tools and they are happy with it. And often, sometimes they are not, and they have good feedback. And then we can work on this feedback and make them happy again. So yeah, so it's very rewarding actually to talk to the users of our tools. So I think that's how I became DevRel very sneakily, so without me noticing actually. What are the gaps that I currently noticed in the DevRel profession so far? So yeah, let's maybe trim this down to blockchain in particular. Okay. So just to scope it, to make the question a little bit more, to reduce the scope of the question. Otherwise, I could like never stop talking about it. But I think what blockchain right now is comparable to the internet in the early 90s. So it's still very, very niche, and it's still very, very nerdy. So, and if you don't believe me, then, well, try to explain what you're doing to your non-crypto friends, to your friends and family that are, well, not professional blockchain developers or DevRels, or, well, you will have a hard time, right? So that's why I think blockchain is still very niche and very nerdy. And I think some of us are sitting like in an ivory tower and pretending that blockchain is something that is super mainstream and we just need to onboard the next billion people, and that blockchain is ready to handle the next billion people, the next billion users. And I think that's not nearly the case. Like the user experience, and I include now user experience and developer experience for blockchain, is still very, very, it's incredibly bad. I know we made huge progress, don't get me wrong. And also, don't get me wrong, I believe that the next billion users will come to blockchain. I think that's inevitable. But I think now is the time actually to build the right foundations and to remind ourselves that what we have so far is still a niche, and to make it more, and we need to actively work on making it more accessible. And by accessible, I also mean not just financially accessible. I think, well, this is already achieved, but technically accessible to people. And that's something that's not achieved yet. Like how we manage private keys is still not in a good state. How we are interacting with wallets and DeFi apps today is not a good way to grow. I think there's so much room for improvement. And I think that's something that every DevRel not even DevRel, that everybody who's building in blockchain, everybody is like contributing in any way to blockchain technology should focus on these truly foundational accessibility problems that we have.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
So Symbolic, well, let me maybe tell you about the journey of Symbolic.
Yeah.
So I started at runtime verification as an auditor and formal verification engineer. And I was doing audits and, auditing is very intimidating. You are getting thrown into a new code base like every month, sometimes twice a month. And then you have to find bugs in a code base that you have never seen before. And then you have to be fast because, these audits are always time constrained. So I was doing that a lot, and I figured, lots of the work that I'm actually doing is tracing executions of smart contracts. So I try to think of a scenario. I tried, what happens if I execute this smart contract function with this parameter combination? And then I pulled out a sheet and a pen, and I just followed the code line by line, track the contents of the variables, and just try to see if everything is working as intended. And this is, I think everybody is doing this. Some people or some auditors are better at doing it just mentally in their head, as some auditors are better doing it with a pen and paper, like I do it. Some do it like digitally on their iPad. But I think all these approaches are still very limited by the fact that we have to kind of manually trace variables in Solidity. I think this is just an inefficiency that could be eliminated by a debugger. So I just started building this debugger for myself because I thought, this is a more efficient way for me to do audits. So basically what the debugger allowed me to do is it allowed me to execute these scenarios that I was playing through in my head way faster. And that allowed me to go more into depth and more into breadth and focus on the high level. I wanted to look for economical attack vectors and not just on I didn't want to waste too much time on low level details like arithmetic rounding errors. I think that's a very easy part that a computer can figure out for me, like a debugger can. So yeah, that's why I started building this debugger first for myself, but then I presented it in the company because I thought that is something that my colleagues would also benefit from. And eventually we decided, that's actually a tool that we want to build at runtime verification and all our auditors can use it. So we did that. And then we noticed, you know what? Why should runtime verification be the only security team that has access to a debugger like other security teams? Other folks would clearly love to use it as well. So we made it free and everybody can use it. And yeah, that's basically the story. I think it's just a great tool for auditors. It was born of our own needs. And now it's it's cool to see it be adopted by the security community, and not just securities, but also by developers.
Interesting.
That's, like I said, I think that's the most challenging part of auditing is you are presented a new code base in every audit. And there's some similarities between protocols. For example, I was really specialized on staking protocols when I joined the company. So I audited a bunch of staking protocols, and that is clearly makes it easier to transition from one code base to another if you're already familiar with the foundations of staking. So, but then there's no guarantee that you can only pick up staking protocols. So eventually you also need to take up a new engagement with a entirely different kind of protocol. And that's where the struggle starts. You're now giving foreign code, but maybe not just the code is new to you, but also the entire economical incentive model is new to you. So you have to figure out, what is this thing here actually doing in front of me? And my technique is, I'm not sure that's the best technique, but I'm just bombing the protocol teams with questions. Like on the first days of an audit, I just literally bombed them with every question that jumps to a mind. And once I have rough understanding of what the protocol should be doing, they use Symbolic to make up scenarios, to step through the code, see if it's actually what it's doing, how the code is architectured. And once you have good understanding of what the protocol should do, what the architecture is, you can actually figure out, okay, is this implementation following the intention of the protocol design, or is it not? Or is there any specifics? Is there some logical piece missing? Are the incentives maybe not aligned, or is there some logical loophole somewhere in the business logic? But I don't have a clear answer to this question. I think it's somebody that every security researcher needs to find his own way of dealing with new code bases. I think tools such as Symbolic can play can be a piece of the puzzle, because they allow you to zoom out from the code and to free your mind from the low-level details and focus on the business logic instead.
Wow, interesting.
How far do you think smart contract engineers should learn about smart contract security? That's a good question. I think some of the best smart contract engineers that I've met, they started as security researchers. And also the other way around. Some of the best security researchers that I have met started as smart contract engineers. I think there's really no clear cut between smart contract engineer and security researcher. And obviously, the better your smart contract engineers are at security, the more money you can save than on external audits. But yeah, so interesting enough, I was talking to some companies at a conference, and they told me they discourage their engineers from writing unit tests because their time would be better spent in developing the code, and testing is kind of testing should be done by other people that maybe get a lower salary check at the end of the month. And I think this is just the worst thing that you can do. If you don't take security seriously in this space, then you're going to get wrecked, and that's harming everybody. That's harming your team. Like if you get hacked, then there's no good way to recover from this situation. Your protocol is likely to sunset. All your customers will be disappointed. You will have the most stressful phase of your professional life. So please don't do this. Please care about security. And only hire engineers that are really deep into security. Otherwise, you are double spending, because you're spending first on your engineer who doesn't care about security, and then you're spending twice the money on the external audits and external security services that you must consult.
So now there's this thing I've been noticing on Web3 Security Twitter about people saying, okay, they are leaving Solidity audits, that it's getting a bit crowded, and all of them are moving to Rust because there are probably new old VMs coming out now, and it's quite interesting. But for someone like you, what do you think about that? Do you think people should be pivoting from Solidity, or do you think Solidity is actually here to stay and take the larger share of Web3 engineering?
It's just natural that security researchers follow opportunities, and if there's if the Solidity space is getting more competitive, then looking out for other niches where they can probably make more money, then this is just inevitable. And it's their fair right, the fair thing to do, right? So I also have to say, one-time verification is not only doing Solidity tools. We are also developing tools for Rust and other programming languages. I think one of the very cool things about one-time verification's tooling is that we have this, for example, Control, our symbolic execution tool for Solidity, is built on top of the K framework. And the K framework is actually, that's the backbone of control. That is where all the deep logical reasoning happens, where the symbolic execution algorithms are actually implemented. And this K framework is independent of any particular programming languages. So we have another tool to do formal verification with Rust and with WebAssembly code spaces, and they are also built on top of the K framework. So that's I think, a very cool thing about runtime verification is we have this
diverse.
We have this cool core technology that can be used independent of a particular programming language. So we can very easily spin up new formal verification tools for new ecosystems. Actually, that's also something that we are very specialized in. So, but then for me personally, I'm also very committed to Ethereum because I just, this is just very, very personal. I think that Ethereum is has great values, and I like to be part of the Ethereum community. And I also think that Solidity, I know many people don't like it, but I personally think Solidity is a cool programming language.
Yeah, really.
Specifically because it is comparatively simple. Like if you compare Solidity to Rust, then okay, Rust is more modern. Rust is cool, and I really like Rust from a programming language nerd perspective. But Solidity is just an order of magnitude simpler than Rust, and simplicity is really key when it comes to security. And also the EVM is much, much, much simpler, an order of magnitude simpler than the WebAssembly virtual machine, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
And now the Rust compiler is also a magnitude of order more complex than the Solidity compiler. So I think, it's fair that so many security researchers move onto Rust and onto Rust ecosystems and auditing Solana contracts, for example, because there's also the attack surface is just so much bigger. There's so much more complexity in Solana smart contracts than there is in Solidity smart contracts. Also, I think that, from a tooling perspective, Solidity is not used outside the Ethereum ecosystem somewhere, right? It's just there for blockchain smart contracts. So there's obviously, for a company that is developing programming language tooling like we are, there's obviously a lot of things that we can do and that we must do for Solidity. For Rust, on the other hand, that's a programming language that's also very heavily used in system programming. So they already have good tooling coming from other industries. So this might be, I think this might actually be one of the failure points of Ethereum is Ethereum is competing with other blockchain ecosystems that are using mainstream programming languages. And Ethereum is using their own programming language, is using their own virtual machine. And if the Ethereum ecosystem does not acknowledge this and the need to build our own security tooling, and honestly, it feels a bit like this. It feels a bit like the developer tooling for Solidity is somewhat overlooked in this space. So it's really hard to find companies investing into public goods. Yeah, I think this could lead to a decline of Ethereum in the long run if we don't get it sorted out. And I think the time to sort it out, to solve these problems, is now. And that's why we are building the Solidity debugger and control, because we think, these tools, they are needed to make Ethereum successful in the long run.
Interesting. And speaking of Ethereum, several things have been going on lately on the tooling side of things, on the governance side of things, and even in the market structure thing. But what do you think is probably the future of Solidity on Ethereum? And if the EF members are probably listening to this podcast right now, how do you think the Ethereum Foundation or the core Ethereum community can actually help build or help encourage, maybe not
Yeah,
encourage,
I
or
wouldn't
how can
make
they
this
kind of
question only
enhance the
about the
tooling we
Ethereum
currently have?
Sorry, I did not try to interrupt you. Just your connection was, I think,
Okay, to
breaking
make
off.
it wider.
I don't want to make my answer just about the Ethereum Foundation because, well, the Ethereum Foundation is one of the players that is actually investing into developer tooling, that is actually investing into security tooling. So they are doing the right thing. But of course, there's the Ethereum Foundation is not the only stakeholder of Ethereum. Like the entire community, especially like the protocols building on top of Ethereum, they should be they have an interest in their own to contribute back somehow to a good tooling landscape. And that's something that we don't see sufficiently. Like there's very good programs like the Optimism Retro Funding Program, for example. So they are really contributing back to open source software that they have been using, that they know that made their success possible. But there's far too few teams doing this. So yeah, I think good security tooling, good developer tooling is not just in the interest of the Ethereum Foundation. It's in the interest of every protocol team building on top of Ethereum. It's in the interest of every user who's interacting with Ethereum, who's investing. So yeah, let's not just make the story about the Ethereum Foundation because they are not responsible for paying for all this, right? We must kind of, I don't know how, it's very difficult, but we kind of must come to a model where there's an incentive for all the stakeholders to contribute back to open source developer tooling. And I mean, there is an incentive already. That is because it makes their development easier and more economical and more secure in the long run. But then there's also a free riders problem with like practically any other public goods. Many stakeholders expect that the other teams are kind of paying for this infrastructure. I don't know how, but we must find a more sustainable model to incentivize funding into developer tooling for Solidity and Ethereum. Worries.
So while we are speaking about Ethereum, there's been this argument that maybe the Ethereum leadership have not been so efficient lately, and some are trying to say, okay, maybe we need another foundation and all that. In your opinion, what do you think the Ethereum community needs to do to get better and to see faster innovations? Because some of the current arguments now is that the innovations are not kind of efficient or fast enough. And so what do you think can be done better?
Well, I think there's obviously some conflict here between efficiency and governance processes that are openly to everyone and that are open to everyone and that allow community participation. So, for example, I think Ethereum is often criticized for the complex EIP process that we have. But because it's criticized because it's inefficient, it would probably be faster to just decide this from some authority instead of going through an EIP process and having all the stakeholders agree on a common state. But then I think this is also kind of a strength of Solidity, of Ethereum, right? Is, okay, we have this open governance process. Everybody knows how to contribute to the EIP process, and everybody can do that. So obviously, I think, well, just replacing the EIP process with some more authoritative process where things are decided from the top, I think wouldn't be the right direction for Ethereum. There is other ecosystems that are doing that, and they are maybe faster at shipping some specific innovations, and that's good. I really think that's good. But it's also good that we have this open, decentralized governance structure in Ethereum. So I'm actually a fan of that. So I think we shouldn't change it for a more authoritative approach.
Impressive. Good. And while we are still discussing Ethereum, some say that L2s are probably parasitic on Ethereum as an L1, and Ethereum isn't really growing as a chain itself, but rather more like supporting the L2s on it. So what's your view on the relationship between L2s and Ethereum? Do you think it's parasitic or it's kind of symbiotic enough?
No, first of all, I have big problems with the term parasitic.
Rightly so.
I think that's a kind of, I think, for example, look at what Optimism is doing. They are, and the OP stack, I think that is all, like they are a big contributor to the entire Ethereum ecosystem, and calling them parasitic, I don't know. That just sounds too harsh. It sounds wrong. They should be, they contributed, like they are big contributors, and they should be acknowledged for the work that they do. So, I mean, there's been, there's been, I think the main frustration doesn't come really from, or I think the main frustration comes maybe from the sequence of fees that these L2s are taking. And I think, okay, that's just my humble opinion. Maybe I'm wrong with this one, but I think the sequence of fees, it's what's really bothering people. And I think then we should have a more open discussion about the sequence of fees instead of just calling L2s parasitic when they are actually not. They are, like, there's an aligned incentive between the Ethereum L1 and the L2s. They are all contributing to a larger ecosystem. I think Ethereum L1 is good for providing the base layer of security. And then L2s are great at exploring different trade-offs and exploring innovative ideas. And some of these L2s, some of the things that are explored on the L2s, they will ultimately end up and they will pass the test of time. Some of these features will be integrated back into the L1. And I think don't you think it's a very interesting approach that we have one that can move a little bit slower, and then we have these different L2s that can move faster and experiment with what works and what works not. And if some of these trade-offs tend to be misaligned, or some of these trade-offs that the L2s take tend not to work out, then they don't need to be, then they didn't impact the L1 at least. So I think it's a good way. It's a good way of, like, developing a base layer at a moderate speed and having these L2s sit on top of it and explore the innovation at a faster pace. I think, so that's just me personally. But of course, I think people have a valid critiques about sequencer fees, and then they should voice this concern more honestly, more transparently than just calling L2s parasitic.
I mean, I noticed the same too, and I just think, first of all, one of the things I probably appreciate or I love about the Ethereum community is the open debate and open discussion. It's only that sometimes maybe, ad hominem attacks and not being, how will I put it, probably like not being kind of intellectually honest while debating some things, and I think it kind of draws back progress and all that.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also there's so much complexity, and it's also very hard to participate in these very opinionated debates. Like so for example, I think, I'm probably an expert on the execution layer. I know a lot about the EVM and Solidity, and I have very, very strong opinions about how the EVM should evolve in the future. I have very strong opinions about how Solidity should evolve in the future. But then there's other things like this debate where I'm just not the best expert to answer this question. Of course, I have some opinions about it, and if you may just notice, my opinions are also strong, but they are loosely held. I think that's a fair way to put it. I have strong opinions about L2s and how they are not parasitic. But this is probably not my where I see my strength, like in these kind of debates.
I mean, I the person, I probably prefer doing stuff, building stuff than mostly debating, because it's always not really productive. But like to wrap it up, what do you have to say to builders in the ecosystem currently in terms of building things and pushing products to market? What do you kind of have to say to builders now?
Well, I'm coming from a security background, and I think, well, the only real advice I can give to builders, because I'm not myself a builder, and it feels a bit coming from an ivory tower telling, like giving advice to these protocol teams. But the only advice that I can give with a good feeling is care about your security and do it early, like invest early into your security. I've seen so many protocols that start their security journey just before they want to deploy, and then they are shocked by the costs and by the time that it takes to secure their protocol. And you don't want to fall into this trap. The sooner you care about your security process, like the better for your protocol. It will be more cost effective for you to get early invested into security. It will be more cost effective, and it will also be faster because you have shorter feedback cycles. Like if you're developing in silence for 1 year and then you start looking for audits, it's going to delay your deployment process for a couple of months at least. If you're taking security seriously from day one and consult with some security experts, you get intermediate audits. Then you will be able to ship faster, and you will also be able to save some money on your security budget.
I think I like that, because like most people from the marketing team, we always pressure everybody to be like, okay, let's ship fast. But if the security side is not done on time, like if it wasn't done from day one, it's to kind of delay things and make things drag. Anyway, thank you so much, Raoul, for coming on the podcast. And I really appreciate I enjoyed the conversation myself. I mean, it's very interesting. And I really want to thank you for coming. I'm not minding my network that was acting up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, don't worry. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And hope to speak to you again.
Thank you. Bye.